God. In, in the immortal words of Anthony Weiner, God, what a crazy world. What a crazy world. What the hell is wrong with you people?
It's not Weiner, it's Weiner. I don't know why everybody pronounces it Weiner.
There's a principle in Talmudic lore that says Kishem hu kain hu. That's why. If Kishmo kain hu, yeah. All right, a couple of announcements. I'm not going to go beyond that. A couple. Come on in, please. It's nice to see all of you. Shabbat Shalom. It's a pleasure to have you here. A couple of announcements of things going on in the show. Delighted to have you here this morning. This morning, following our Torah study, you're all invited inside the synagogue for a really sweet kid's bat mitzvah. A really wonderful family, too. The Yadagars are great. And then this morning, as part of the bat mitzvah, this is Parshat Noach, the Torah portion that tells the story of Noah. One of our in-house musicians, Bob Remstein, who happens to be a wonderfully talented composer as well, has done a lot of television and movie music, has composed a short cantata on the story of Noah. And he's going to present that this morning in the sort of sermon spot after the Torah reading. He's bringing a group of singers that work with him, and they're going to present. It's a sort of operetta, a 20-minute operetta on the story of Noah. So if anybody come on, it's a beautiful piece. It's actually, it's charming and it's enchanting and it's very, very nice. So you're all invited to hear that. And of course, after that, there's lunch. I don't know what it is this morning. And then after that, there's Parsha study with Julie. What? It's lasagna. After that is Parsha study with Judy. This Wednesday night begins the College of Jewish Studies. This is, for those of you joining, coming to VBS, this is our adult learning series. And we started 13 years ago trying to offer university-level learning to adults. The joke is it's university-level learning without football games, sororities, or quizzes. And this year we're going to be looking at Israel since 1967. It's called 6 plus 50. The last 50 years since 1967 have really changed the state of Israel, changed the Middle East, changed American Jewish attitudes toward Israel. It's a very complicated but a very wonderful overview of the history. So the first lecture will be this Wednesday night at 7 o'clock, and our guest is Yoav Ben-Chorin, who's the Israel Studies Director at De Toledo High School and formerly of the RAND Corporation, and a very, very wise and broad thinker about Israel and the world. And he's going to give us the sort of overview of the topic. And then next week we'll have Dr. Joshua Moravchik, who teaches at Johns Hopkins University. And he's going to be talking about the content of his book, which is When David Became Goliath, How the World Turned Against Israel. And talk about how Israel went from being the sort of hero of the world to being where it is now. And then the whole series is a stellar series of wonderful people that we got to come teach. So please come and enjoy these talks. It's a very nice opportunity to gain a big perspective about Israel. You'll actually know something, and you'll be able to read the paper with some intelligence. So that's what we're doing. That's the next. And then, of course, Torah study every Shabbos morning. So we're good with that. Okay? This morning we're going to proceed through the book of Genesis. But first up, just an overview about the book of Genesis. If the book of Genesis weren't in the Bible, if it were a piece of literature, we would look at it differently. First of all, the first thing you'd say about the book of Genesis is that its character is this character called God, G-O-D. Forget what you know about him, God, from elsewhere, because that's not the God of Genesis. Come in, there's plenty of room. We got lots of Jews. Come on. This character is a developing character, and the purpose of the literature is to do what most literature does, to give us a sense of who this character is and how this character develops. The first thing this character does is create a world. And we don't know why. And we don't know what this character's expectations are. And then that is the sort of unfolding story of the book of Genesis. Because the last thing that this God creates is a human being, is man, created in the image of God. And the story of the book of Genesis is the relationship between these two principal characters, between God and human beings. This God has expectations for this character human being, and one of the ongoing themes of the story is God's disappointment. Is the disappointment with this character, that this character somehow just doesn't live up to the expectations and the ideals and the standards of this character called God. So in the first Torah portion, which we read last week, he puts this man into the garden, into this paradise, and says, enjoy it, but don't touch my magic tree. And right away, man and woman run over and start eating from the magic tree. And then it's downhill from there. It's actually a very depressing Torah portion last week, because it starts with so much promise, Bereshit bara Elohim, in the beginning God created heaven and earth. And then you go from the Garden of Eden to Cain and Abel, where you have the first two born brothers in the world, and one offs the other. We'll take a look at that in a moment. And then from Cain and Abel, the world gets filled with violence and evil. And at the end of the Torah portion last week, God says, to hell with this. Okay, just to hell with this, right? My dad taught me how to bake. So I love baking when I ever have a chance. It's every now and again when you're baking something, you goof. Sometimes you mix up the sugar and the salt, or you leave out an ingredient. And what comes out of the oven should not be touched by human hands, right? And what you do then, if you've ever had this experience, is you take it and you bury it, but you put it underneath the garbage can, so no one ever knew you baked it. Oh, Dad, didn't you make brownies? No, no. Smells like no brown, because they're a 1/4 inch thick and weigh 82 pounds. You don't want anyone to touch these. And that's what God gets to the end. He's like, to heck with this. And what you have in the book of Genesis then is a play in 3 acts. First act is Adam, which is God's plan for a creature that would reflect divine dreams and divine expectations, God's expectations. That doesn't work out. So God says to hell with it. And just as about to throw the whole thing out and go try Jupiter or Mars or another planet, he notices one character who has promise. His name is Noach, Noah. And the Torah says Noah ish tzaddik. He was a righteous man, tamim b'doracha. In his generation, he was the best of the lot. So God tries again. Build an ark, save the animals, wash the world clean, put this man into the world, gives him some instructions, and once again, this man disappoints. And you get this idea of the disappointment. So one of the questions you have to ask yourself as you're reading the Bible on many levels is, what part of us does the God character represent? Who in us or who among us does the God character represent? It seems to me the God character represents the idealist among us. The one who says, I want a better world. If I want a better world, why am I confronted constantly with the intransigence of the world as it is? It's stubborn evil. It's stubborn mediocrity. You ever have that sense? Sitting on the 405 at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, going 1 mile an hour, thinking to yourself that they closed this for 10 years and spent $1 billion so I could go 2 miles an hour. And as you're going through the canyon, you see where they shaved off whole mountains, You say, oh, that had such promise, And here I am going 2 miles an hour, right? You know what I'm talking about? And much less if you watch the evening news, in which case you really get. And then this God doesn't give up. So that's the counterpoint to the disappointment, is God's persistence. Someone wrote a nice drusha they sent me on the email. It says, it's not the question of the faith in God, it's the question of the faith of God. It's a God who doesn't give up. So he's going to try a third time. And the third time he decides, if I can't create a human being to reflect my vision of the world, and I couldn't choose a human being to reflect my vision of the world, maybe I can teach one. And he chooses a guy. Well, this is next week's Torah portion. It's a preview of coming attractions. He chooses this fellow, Abram. Now, the Midrash gives you a long discussion of why Abram was chosen. I know the real answer. His name began with A. Because the whole purpose of the Torah portion is not to say that he was a righteous man like Noah, or a man created in the image of God the way Adam was. The whole purpose of the Torah portion is to take some random slob and say, you can be the vessel of divinity. His name began A.B., Abram. He was the first guy in line. If his name had been Zachary, he would have never gotten chosen, you know. And he takes this guy and he says, I have a deal for you. You leave home. Yeah, you leave. Well, that's coming. You leave. No, but first, that wasn't his name at first. I mean, his name was Avram, but we don't know that's the whole idea. I mean, at first it was just, you know, it takes the guy and he says to him, leave home, leave what you know. I'm going to create you over again, and I'm going to make you a vessel of divine blessing. And the rest of the Torah is going to play out that drama. So this is today we're in the Noah story, which is the second act of the 3-act drama. Make some sense? So let's take a quick look. I want to take a look today at how evil enters the world. We're going to do a brief look backwards, and then we're going to take a look forward. We'll take a look at 2 stories today. So if you have the Chumash, and I hope you do, let's go back for a moment. Let's go back for a moment to the to Cain and Abel. Yeah, 24, page 24. So please, Brian, come and get a seat. You don't want to stand. It's dangerous. You don't want to be standing while a rabbi talks. That could be dangerous to you. You could doze off and bump your head. Okay, good. Now, what's just happened? This is chapter 4 of Genesis. So what's just happened is the man and woman have just been cast out of the garden. And man and woman have been either cursed or told their nature, really. And the thing that has entered the story is death. In the Garden of Eden, there was immortality. You never died because there was no time in the Garden of Eden. But out here in the real world, there's time, and time means there's death. And so Adam loses his immortality. And what's the first thing that he does, having been told that he will not have his own personal immortality? He seeks another way to have immortality, the way most of us seek to have immortality. The man knew his wife, and she conceived and bore a child. Most of us seek immortality through the families we create. That's the next step, which means in a certain way this is a profound statement of his own faith. Because you can imagine a man who would be told, you get out of Eden, he sits down and just dies. He refuses to die, he makes life. And he creates life. Now, Cain is the firstborn human being in the world. And in the Bible, whenever anybody is born, they have a name, they're given a name, and names always mean something. There's nobody in the Bible that his mother says, and he shall be called Steve, because I like the name. You know, Brett. I don't know why, Brett. It's not why. So it's Cain, right? And she gives the derivation of his name. And the translation is thoroughly unhelpful here, because the translation is going to add a word. And by adding a word to the sentence, it eliminates the beautiful ambiguity of the sentence. The sentence in Hebrew is, Kaniti ish et Adonai. And the word that the translator offers is help. Because the real phrase is, Kaniti, I have acquired ish, a man, et Adonai. Now, et Adonai is a very ambiguous phrase. It could mean with God's help. It could also mean despite God. Or opposed to God. It can mean lots of different things. What is the wonder that she's expressing? How was every human being up to this point created in the world? God created every human being. All of a sudden, Eve gives birth to a person, to a human being, and what does she say? I did this. Who needs God? Remember, she's the one who ate the fruit first, so she has more wisdom than her husband. Okay? No, it's true. She got the better bite, right? She has more wisdom than her husband. It's still true today. It's absolutely. And you someday, Emmett, you will find this out, right? You have no idea how true this is. So she now has created a human being. So it could be what the translator says, I've created a man with God, or it could be I've created a man despite God, or I've created a man in the face of God. I mean, it's got lots of interesting ambiguity in that sentence. In any case, he carries a certain kind of pride, right? Then she bore his brother Abel, and we have no derivation of the name Abel. But you all know the name Abel, because the name Abel is Hevel, and Hevel is the first word in Ecclesiastes. Futility, emptiness. You know this because you get weather reports here in LA. Hevel literally is early morning low clouds and fog burning off by 10 a.m. So his name is, he ain't going to be around very long. She didn't have much confidence in his existence, right? Now, the Torah tells us what? They split the world. One became a tiller of the land, and one became a keeper of sheep. Verse 3, in the course of time, Cain brought an offering to the Lord from the fruit of the soil, and Abel, for his part, brought the choicest of the firstlings of the flock. Now, that's a very interesting sentence. In the course of time, religion occurs to them. And what the Bible seems to indicate is that this is a natural impulse. It's just sort of in you. It's an impulse. Life has been good. Let's say thank you to the Creator. And how you do it is also understood. Because the culture of the Bible is what you don't even see. It's there in front of you, but you don't even see it. So for the Bible, it's completely obvious that number one, you would want to thank the Creator, and number two, you would do it in the form of a sacrifice. So the two of them offer sacrifices. The Lord paid heed to Abel and his offering, but to Cain and his offering, he paid no heed. Cain was much distressed. Why was he distressed? Because it was his idea. He did it first. He was the one who built the first. It was his idea. He built the altar, and he's the big brother, and he was distressed, and his face fell. He becomes depressed. And now God looks at him, and God's never seen this before. He's never seen this part of the human being. Disobedience God has seen, but never this. Jealousy, rage, and the power of those emotions. And God talks to him and says, why are you bummed? Why are you distressed? Why is your face fallen? If you do right, there is uplift. But if you do not do right, sin crouches at the door, its urge is toward you, but you can be its master. Crouches. Doesn't have an R? Couches? I thought it was couch. Rovates. Maza rovates. Crouch. It should be, it's a missing R. Yeah, I think it should be crouches. Am I wrong? No, I don't think. The image is of a vicious animal. The image is of a vicious animal that's standing at the doorway. In other words, the image, the metaphor is that this jealousy, this rage, this urge is in you. It's like an animal. I mean, the best example I can give you is the following. Please do not identify yourself because I don't want you to be embarrassed. But anyone here ever had a moment of road rage? You're driving, somebody does something immoral, evil, and stupid, goes ahead of you at a four-way stop, right? Cuts in front of you, won't let you. On the 101, right?
On the way to the 405.
Right.
Sons of bitches.
Yes, right. That's hell.
Never had that thought.
No, I don't think so. Never happened. Never happened. And for a split second, your adrenaline rises, this power in your body. It's an animal power. It's an animal power. It's actually biologically an impulse, a system that's there to protect you. It's an animal power that turns you into a killer. And you're controlling 3,500 pounds of Japanese steel. And as you're just about to slam on the accelerator and hurtle your automobile into the back bumper of that son of a bitch who has a baby in the back of the car, and that's the sin that crouches at the door. It's not you. I mean, it's not me. I'm not that kind of person. That son of a, you know? And then you sort of pull back and you say, wait. This is not good, you know? And that's the contest, right? So what we have discovered in the story is what? That there are impulses within the human being, which are these animal impulses. This animal impulse. And God says to him, control it. You can control that. Now, I think it's important to take a moment and distinguish this from a different tradition, which is the whole notion of original sin. The Christian notion of original sin was that inevitably you will sin. And the Jewish notion of original sin it's not original sin. The Jewish notion of sin is that you always have a choice. So the Christian, what's going to happen, and it's actually in the Noah story, where God's going to say the imagination of human beings is evil from their youth, and the Christian tradition said, amen. There's no way that human beings can control these urges, and therefore they're going to need a mediating factor, which is Christ. But the Jewish tradition said, you have it in you to control it. You always have this choice. You can hit that accelerator, or you can take a deep breath, change the channel on the radio, and realize that you've been blessed in your life to even drive a car. I mean, you can control it, but that's the contest. And God says to him, be careful. God says that's a powerful thing you're wielding there. Be careful. It's loaded. You know, that weapon is loaded. Hang on a minute. I want to get through the end of the story, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Cain said to, the next verse on page 26. Now, there's an ellipse in the text. There's a gap in the text. Cain says to Abel, ... Literally, that's what's in the Torah. There's an ellipse. No. There's not ... There's an ellipse. There's a gap in the Torah text, and we don't know what they said. So the Midrash, the later tradition, is going to rush in there and fill in all the different things they were talking about. Why do men murder? Well, open the morning newspaper. Why do men murder? For money, for love, for power. For you fill in the blank, and the Midrash will give you a narrative for each one of those. And when they were in the field, Cain set upon his brother Abel and killed him. And the Lord said to Cain, so the Lord said to Cain means, where's God in all of this? Apparently he's right there. So one of the questions is, why doesn't he stop them? And the Lord said to Cain, where's your brother Abel? And he says, I don't know. Hashomer achi anochi. Am I my brother's shomer? Keeper, shomer, guard. Am I responsible for him? And that question goes unanswered, by the way, because that's one of along with Ayeka, is one of the perennial questions. Are you your brother's keeper? Right? And God said, "What have you done? Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground." Now, what's important about this story is the following. Sigmund Freud posited that the driving dynamic of human development and the driving dynamic of human history is the Oedipal complex. Is the little boy who desires his mother and realizes that his father is a hell of a lot bigger and stronger than he is and threatens to kill or castrate him. And so the little boy fantasizes about offing the father and taking the mother. But when he realizes that's not going to happen, he becomes the father. He identifies with the father. And that's how little boys become men. He identifies with the father and then goes out in the world and finds a girl just like the girl who married dear old dad. That's human development according to Sigmund Freud. It is the human being develops, and human history, he argued, in Civilization and Its Discontents, is driven by the same parental narrative. So he has this whole theory that we elect leaders and then kill them. That's a happy thought for Tuesday, don't you think? Okay? That we have to, that the tribe gathers together and kills the alpha male, and that's the driving dynamic of human civilization. The Bible disagrees with Freud. The Bible says that the driving dynamic of human development and of human history is not your relationship with your parents, but the relationship with siblings. It is a sibling relationship where you become the person you're meant to be. And therefore, the book of Genesis is going to be organized in terms of brother stories. Cain and Abel, the children of Noah, Abraham and his brother Haran is dead, so it's going to be his brother's son Lot, Isaac and Ishmael, Jacob and Esau, Joseph and his brothers, and eventually we're going to get to Moses and Aaron and Moses and Korach. All brother stories. The whole Bible is about brother stories. And the whole Bible's brother stories is the paradigm is right here. One God, two brothers. One blessing, two brothers. One birthright, two brothers. One earth, two brothers. And the question of the Bible is, can you figure out how to get along with your brothers? It's the question that God asks Cain. Are you your brother's keeper? Can you control the urge to destroy your brother? That's going to be the driving dynamic of the entire Torah tradition. All right, Douglas, you had a question?
I have a question about
Yeah.
It seems to me that Cain's operating under a false premise.
Oh, really, you think? Like, give me what I want or I'll kill you? You think that's a false premise?
Making an offering.
Yeah,
You got a barbecue.
Yeah.
You put on some meat and some grilled vegetables.
right.
And geez, surprise, surprise, the meat smells good and vegetables smell like vegetables.
Nah, I think it's better than that, actually. You want to know what I think it is? All right, so I want to go this far. Right? So he builds an altar, right? Right? And he puts the vegetables on top of the altar. Maybe they're nice vegetables, olive oil, some garlic. You have roasted vegetables.
Vegetables.
You put it. You build a fire, and the smoke goes where? Up. He takes the carcass of a sheep, builds an altar, puts the carcass of the sheep on the altar, builds a fire, and the smoke goes up. So when the Torah says, God, I'm going to spill the coffee, and that's a bad thing. When the Torah says the following on page 25, the third line down, the Lord paid heed to Abel and his offering, but to Cain and his offering he paid no heed. How would you know? How would you know? It's not about the smell of the vegetable. How would you know that God accepts the one and not the other? How would you know?
Did the smoke not go up?
No, the smoke went up in both cases. Smoke always goes up. My neighborhood's full of smoke. There used to be a Tony Roma's across the street. And it was wonderful because I would teach this text and you'd smell it. You'd say, my God, how did the rabbi do that? I want to suggest a crazy thing. Ready? I think that line is written not from the objective narrator's point of view, but from Cain's point of view.
That's right.
If you... A Gesundheit an Keppele. It's like what every rabbi in the world needs, right? You take her with you, and whenever you say something, she says, that's right. I love it. I know her. Right?
And I never agree.
I know. So she's not discriminating. What can I tell you? Thank you. Has there ever been an older brother in the history of the world who didn't think he was cheated?
Right.
Has there ever been an older brother in the history of the world who did? Because if you're an older brother, for 18 months, I owned the world. I had all of mommy and daddy's attention. And then this little ball of poop and noise came into the world. And he became the center of mommy's attention, and I got nothing. Son of a, I got nothing. But they told me they gave me a little baby doll, right? They gave me a little, so I would have my own dolly. You have it on video. And apparently they turned around for a minute to eat a little something, and they caught me standing over the crib going, ready to beat I was going to beat the baby to death with my baby doll because he stole everything from me. He stole mommy, he stole daddy, he stole my birthright, he stole my blessing. That's the whole, every little brother, that's how I think it is. Yeah,
So when God created Adam and Eve,
yeah,
He gave them the garden.
yeah,
So it was all vegetables.
yeah. What is it with vegetables today?
Why did it offer the animals to people to eat?
Yeah. No, the animals you were not to eat. In fact, not only vegetables, you weren't allowed to eat vegetables, only fruit. What's the difference between eating vegetables and eating fruit? When you take an apple off the tree is still alive. When you uproot a carrot, you've killed the plant. The point of the Garden of Eden was that nobody killed anybody. It's the picture of the world with no violence. Right? Vegetables are violence because you've destroyed a carrot, and that poor carrot is screaming for mercy. Put it in hot boiling water, But Eden is the world of no violence. That's the idea. Once we leave the garden, you're going to see the story here is after the flood, God says to man, okay, you can eat meat. This is a concession. Hang on a second. It's a concession to human violence. What? Chapter 9. Now, Rabbi Gelman wrote a beautiful midrash in Moment magazine. You want to tell it or can I tell it? It's a beautiful midrash. Rabbi Gelman writes midrashim, and I found this midrash many years ago. And I used to tell this to kids. And I used to teach it because it's a beautiful, the midrash is Noah wakes up after the flood, and in his dreams he had a hamburger. And he could taste it. And the juices ran down his face, in and out. It was like just this thick, juicy, luscious burger. And he wakes up and he'd never seen such a thing in real life, so he started asking all of his friends, the animals, like, what is this thing, And he went to, and every animal looked at him like he was crazy. And finally he went to the snake or something. He went to one of the snake, he said, like, what is this thing? Snake said, okay, here's what you do. You ready? You kill the cow, you clean it, you cook it, and you eat it on a sesame seed bun with special sauce. And Noah was aghast. Noah says, this is a beautiful mention. Noah says, you kill the cow. The cow's my friend. The cow gives milk. The cow is kind. The cow is, is soulful. Why would I kill the cow? Well, if you want a hamburger, that's what you have to do. But night after night, Noah had this dream of this hamburger. And finally, one day, he couldn't do it anymore. He couldn't control himself. So when the cow wasn't looking, he snuck up and bam! He offed the cow. Cleaned it, grilled it, ate it. And it was every bit as good as the dream told him it was. But the next day, no animal would ever talk to him. They were still angry. And the last line is, and they're still angry to this day. It's just a beautiful story. So we have here, in chapter 9, after the flood, you have the beginning of meat eating. And the question about meat eating is the following. Take a look at page 50. This isn't the story we're going to get to today, but you've raised it, so let's go, right? Look at verse. God blessed Noah and his sons and said, be fertile and increase and fill the earth. That sounds familiar. Page 50, chapter 9. The fear and dread of you shall be upon all the beasts of the earth. That's new. Before you were responsible, you could rule the world, but now fear and dread of you. And upon all the birds of the sky, and everything which the earth is astir, and upon all the fishes, they're given into your hand, but no longer given into your hand to rule over and protect, as they were in the first Parsha, in the first section. Now, you'll see what it is. Every creature that lives shall be yours to eat. As he's not Jewish. He's from Kentucky. Buckets, barrels, crispy, extra crispy, epis, right? As the green grass I give to these. You must not, however, eat flesh with its lifeblood in it, but for your own lifeblood I'll require a reckoning. Now here's the question. He gives him meat. Why does he give him meat to eat? Is it a need for nutrition? Apparently not, because he created the human being to be a vegetarian. We know that from the first chapter. The giving of meat, at least in this chapter, it seems to me, and you can read it again, because look at the juxtaposition. You will not eat the flesh with its blood in it, but for your own lifeblood I require a reckoning. It means, that's exactly the point. It's a concession to human violence. God recognizes that in the heart of a human being is the impulse to kill. And rather than have you go out and kill people, I'll let you kill animals. So that the desire to eat meat is not for the taste or the texture or the experience of meat eating. It's a desire to kill something. There is a mamar, there's a Gemara somewhere, and I don't know where it is. There's a Gemara somewhere that says a wonderful thing. A rabbi said, if you want to eat it, you should be the one to kill it. I was teaching little kids. I teach kashrus to little kids, kosher law, little kids. And I said to the kids something like, when was the first time you realized that the chicken on your plate was once a bak chicken? And these kids looked at me and went, oh. Because they experience meat on a plate. We experience meat all nicely, freezer wrapped in the butcher shop or the supermarket. It was once a living animal. And the rabbi who made that statement said, You know, if you're not willing to look this animal in the eye, lift a knife over it, and take on the ugly work of killing it, you have no right to be the end user of the same product, to industrialize and to hide it. The rabbis rejected that idea. They rejected it because they were afraid there'd be people that would enjoy killing animals. So instead they would turn over the killing of an animal to a specially trained professional who did it with regret. And there's actually a whole tradition of how you kill an animal. It's supposed to be done with a degree of regret. I have to do this so the community can have meat, but it's not anything that I enjoy. But this is the point. So the notion of a restricted dietary law was a restriction on that part of yourself. Ultimately, kosher is not, first of all, you know that kosher law is not about keeping healthy. Trust me on this, right? Otherwise, God would have said wheat bread for everybody. But the point is to try to separate the milchik and the fleshik in you. Milk represents that which is life-giving. It's what a mother offers a child. Meat represents the urge to kill. You have a milchik urge and a fleshik urge. And the question of whether you can identify them and separate them and not mix them up, that really is the essence of kosher law. I'm telling you that. That's why I'm telling it to you. Right? That's the essence of kosher. That's what the essence of kosher law is. It's a symbolic, ethical act of separating the impulses within me. And the counter case, the contrary evidence. Let's put it this way. The contrary evidence is the career of one actor we all know as Arnold Schwarzenegger. For a long time, Arnold Schwarzenegger, before he became a famous politician, was an actor. I don't know if you knew that. And he was, for a long time, the highest paid actor in Hollywood. Did you know that? And he was not the highest paid actor in Hollywood because of his nuanced portrayals of the human condition. Shakespeare he didn't do. Schwarzenegger made his living hurting people. In every one of his movies, even the comedies, he hurt people. And you just for a moment, step back and be a Martian and look at that as a cultural artifact. That we would gain an entertainment thrill out of a guy who artfully hurts people. Right? That's what the Torah was concerned about when you mix up the life-giving and the life-taking urges within you. When you gain a thrill out of violence, even vicariously. So the Torah says, don't do that. Split them. Keep them identified so you know that you have them both. And enhance one and delimit the other. And that's what this is about. It's about delimiting the life-taking urge within the human being, the violence of the human heart. That's what it was supposed to be. Now, that was before the UO got involved, and and all the craziness of, that we get today. But that's originally what it was supposed to be. Yes, please.
The young man.
Emmett. Hi. You have a question?
Not anymore.
Okay. Are you sure?
You answered it.
All right, I'll be right back. Billy.
But doesn't this underscore that man is made in the image of God because man can kill animals and God killed everything in the flood?
Yeah, but God said, I'll stop doing that. And we haven't stopped killing animals. And God killed everything because of a moral reason. And we don't kill. Part of the Cain and Abel story is to follow. How do you put this gently? A Bengal tiger will kill you, but for lunch. Right? A Bengal tiger will not kill you out of spite or out of rage or out of jealousy. Right? A blue shark will eat you because you're tasty. A blue shark will not eat you because you're a Democrat or a Republican or a Jew or a Muslim. We're the only creature in the world who kills for any reason except territory and self-protection, territory and food. We kill people for all sorts of bizarre reasons. Right? That's what the story is about. But you have that in you. The question is, how do you create a moral culture to teach people to control that urge? That's the great miracle of moral culture. Right? Yeah. Hang on just a second. Yeah.
So what is it in Adam and Eve that Cain learned this behavior from?
Well, that's a great question. So in the Midrash, Cain appeals to God and says, I know I could kill him. I wasn't intending to kill him. Who knew that you could kill a person? No one had ever died. So who knew you could kill? You see? So in the Midrash, they play this out, right? There's also, by the way, a beautiful, beautiful, plaintive, painful midrash that talks about Adam and Eve burying their son, which harks back to generations of, any parents who ever have to do that, and how, that is the uttermost painful thing that a parent ever has, the person has to ever do. But that's one of Cain's defenses. It's one of the reasons why Cain isn't killed. If God demands the blood of the murderer, why doesn't Cain get killed also? And the answer is because he had to be charged with a lesser crime because he didn't have any intention, because he didn't know he could do this. He didn't know what would happen next. You see the issue? It's a very good question. Emmett.
You mentioned earlier that animals don't kill for reasons of territory or food.
Territory they do, I think, yeah.
Territory or food, I want to contest that actually.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
For example, sea lions. There's molas, love molas, big fat fish, eat krill and float around, huge, very funny looking fish. Sea lions rip off their arms.
Yeah.
Their fins.
Yeah.
And leave them to bleed to death in the ocean floor.
Just for the hell of it?
For the hell of it, yes.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. Okay.
They're bright in your morning, Rabbi.
Gonna have to change my Yom Kippur sermon for next year. Except for sea lions, no animal would ever. Turn to page 58. Turn to page 58. We're doing one more short story. So what happens to the world after? So there's a very short narrative, which is one of the most remarkable narratives in Genesis, because it's so short, and because it's so deep, and it's such a short story, and it has so much in it. And so let's take a quick look at this one, page 58. This is after the flood. After the flood, so the children of Noach leave the ark, they fill the world, and here's the next story, right? Everyone on earth had the same language and the same words. Okay, we're on page 58, chapter 11, okay? And as they migrated from the east, they came upon a valley in the land of Shinar, and they settled there. They said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them hard. Bricks serve them as stone, and bitumen as mortar." And they said, "Come, let us build a city and a tower with its top in the sky to make a name for ourselves, else we be scattered over the world." And the Lord came down to look at the city and the tower that man had built. And the Lord said, "If as one people with one language for all, this is how they begun to act, then nothing that they propose to do will be out of their reach. Let us then go down and confound their speech there, so they shall not understand one another's speech." Thus the Lord scattered them from there over the face of the earth, and they stopped building the city. And that's why it was called Babel, because the Lord confounded the speech of the whole earth. And from there the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. Very short story. It was in 9 verses, right? All right, what happens? The people of the world gather in this one place. They build a tower and a city, and God objects and messes with their language, and we get culture. We get multiple cultures, right? What was the sin?
Hubris?
Why is God upset with them? Why is God? This is a very overdetermined story. First of all, it's a cute story. So just telling a story is a nice story. Second of all, it is a legend, which means it explains something. It explains if we came from one family, the family of Noah, how come we're all different? How come we have different cultures and different languages? It explains that. It's actually interesting that it sees multicultural as a punishment, or at least a preventative to keep us from cooperating, because if we cooperated, we wouldn't somehow threaten God. So it sees the lack of communication among human beings as a preventative, as a fence, to keep us from threatening God. What was the sin, though? What bothered God about this project? Yes, please.
I think it's also implying single-mindedness.
Right.
Only having one thought.
Right.
And, in a sense, idolizing or being slave to one thought.
But isn't that interesting? Isn't unity a value? Don't we have political candidates today, mamish today, who promise to bring us together as one? Isn't unity a good thing? This story seems to imply the more unity, the more problems you get, right? right? So that seems to be one of the issues of the story. Look at this story again, and let's go through it carefully, because I think this is a very sophisticated narrative, right? Everyone on earth had the same language and the same words. That's where your one thought is, because you could have said the sentence easier if you would have just said same language. You don't need same words. Why same words? Because we had the same thoughts, right? And they migrated east, and they came upon a valley in the land of Shinar. Anybody happen to know where that is? No. What's the name of the city? It's near Reseda, right? And the name of the city's going to be Bavel. That's a real place.
With a real tower.
It's a real place, and Shinar is the real place where it is, and this is the real tower. There was a real tower in the city of Babylon, Bavel. There was a man-made tower, the ziggurat, where the king went on Rosh Hashanah to get crowned. Now, how did our ancestors come upon this? That empire conquered us in 586 BCE. And they took the upper classes of Israel back to Babel. That's how you pacified a conquered land. You took its leadership back to the imperial capital, and you settled them in the imperial capital. Jerusalem was a relatively small town compared to the great metropolis of Babel, right? And when you move into the great metropolis of Babel, the capital of the city, the first thing you're going to see is this mighty man-made mountain. And that's going to be very impressive. And then what are you going to hear, and what are you going to see, and what are you going to experience? Well, this is the capital of a great empire. So what are you going to experience? Power. Yeah, but what are you going to see? All the different cultures of the world gathered in this place. And everybody speaking different languages. And the great confusion of an empire where lots of people speak different languages. This is the story of a real place. This is our experience of going into exile and coming to a real place called Babel, which is this confusing land. All right, let's go a little farther. You ready? And they said to one another, "Let us make bricks and burn them hard. Bricks serve them as stone, and bitumen as mortar." What is a brick? What is a brick? A brick.
One of the 20 most important technological inventions
The
of human.
first technological.
Well, fire was first.
Fire, the wheel, let's agree. A brick, you have an Apple computer on your desk. You have an electric watch on you have a phone in your purse, which is ringing right now. You have the first great human technology, the brick. Technology. What does technology do? Technology is a tool which means I extend my reach and my power, right? A person can walk so fast. A person walking is slower than most land animals on the planet. But a person on a bicycle is faster than any land animal on the planet. Am I right by that, man? Except for sea lions. Sea lions. Technology extends the power of human beings. Technology extends the power of human beings, but it doesn't extend their wisdom. So the question is, as your power extends and it overreaches your wisdom, what happens when your power overreaches your wisdom? Dr. Feinstein? How many people like old monster movies, old science fiction movies? What is the line that always comes 3/4 through the movie after the giant grasshoppers or giant rabbits or giant crickets or the Frankenstein monster shows up and starts destroying, wreaking havoc in the town? Man should not be messing with this part of nature, right? The overreach of human technology, of human power beyond the limits of human intelligence and wisdom. That is the monster. That's the science fiction movie. That's Frankenstein. The ability to create something you can't control. The ability to create something you can't. You guys never watch Godzilla movies as a kid? You have to move your mouth like this and go, Godzilla, Godzilla, right? And the story of Gajura was that French were doing nuclear testing in Tahiti, right? And out of the waters of Tahiti came this monster because they woke it up, right? It's always the same, because those movies are always about the overreach of technology beyond the power of human wisdom. That's what this story is about. But look at the next one. Look at the next one. Ready? And they said, "Come, let us build a city." Stop. A city. The Torah hates cities. Who was the founder of the first city? Oh, I could show you this, by the way, but we don't have time. The founder of the first city was Cain. Why does Cain need to found a city, start a city? Because he has to hide. Remember, he's a fugitive. Anyone who sees him is going to kill him. So where do you go to hide? You don't hide in a town, everybody knows you. You don't hide in a village, everybody knows you. You hide in a city, nobody knows you. A city is a place of moral anonymity. In a city, you can get lost. In a town, you don't have prostitution because everybody knows that girl's mother and father. No one's gonna let her fall to that level. In a city, you don't have that kind of, in a town, you don't have that kind of degradation. But in a city, you can have that kind of human degradation because she can be anonymous, as can her clients. The Torah hates cities because cities are a place where people do bad things because they can get away with it because nobody knows them. Cities are places, the Bible's very worried about cities. Remember, when did the first King Kong movie come out? 39? 33? The first King Kong, not that early, was it? 37, 30. The first King Kong movie. I like movies. You probably gathered that. Remember that movie? So they go to Africa or wherever they go and they find this monster. And he's so ferocious, and they figure out how to bring him to America. Remember that? And in nature, he is the most powerful thing in nature.
33.
33, good. Between you and Emmett, I don't even, it's great. So they remember the movie? It's just, you should go watch this movie. It's beautiful. In nature, he is so powerful. He rips animals apart and uproots trees, but they bring him to America, remember? And he falls in love with Fay Ray. Remember Fay Ray? Yeah, oh. Beauty and the Beast. And what happens, of course, is, he escapes from the theater, and he's bounding through Manhattan, and he gets to the Empire State Building. When was the Empire State Building built? 33, the same year. The movie was made the same year, the Empire State Building. And what happens is he has Fay Ray in one hand, and he starts climbing the tower. Tower. He starts climbing the Empire State Building. And as he's climbing the Empire State Building, what happens? There's a completely wonderful switch of the gestalt, of the perspective. And suddenly, the most powerful creature in nature is dwarfed by something that human beings created. The tower of, not the biplane, the tower. The Empire State Building. And as he's climbing it, you see how small he gets compared to the Empire State Building. Compared to the Empire State Building, he's very small. And then the planes come and they knock him off. And when he falls and when he dies, for the first moment, you feel sorry for him. Nebuch, he's just a monkey, Right? The story of that movie is about the awesome power of human beings and the awesome power of the city and the awesome power of human technology relative to nature, right? That's another level of this thing. The city as the monster. The city becomes the monster. Because in the city, human beings act in ways that they would never have thought if they knew that people knew who they were and how they were being watched. Okay, now we get to the next one. Ready? So what are you up to? How many, 5 different meanings of this story now? Right now, how about the next one, which is, come let us build a city with a tower with its top in the sky. Now, hang on a second. If I want to build a house, I get a builder, right? And the builder comes and maybe he brings a helper or two, and he lays a foundation, he puts up the framing, he puts up the walls, he does the wiring and the plumbing, and he puts on a roof and I have a house. But if I'm going to build a major project like a tower, one builder can't build a tower. How do you build a tower? Yes. You have to have something called a division of labor. I'm going to have architects, and I'm going to have foremen, and I'm going to have workers, contractors and workers, and then I'm going to have schleppers, and I'm going to have if you put this on a piece of paper, what would it look like? It looks like a tower, right? I have a foreman, and he has supervisors, and they have sub-supervisors, and they have contractors and workers, a hierarchy of labor, a division of labor, and you have masons and carpenters and electricians and plumbers, and you have all of these guys, and they're organized in a tower. It's a pyramid, it's a tower. In order to build something complicated, I have to create a hierarchy of organization, a bureaucracy. Now the question is, what happens to the people at the bottom of that tower? The people at the top, they're running the show. They know what they're doing. They can see the whole project. But the guy at the bottom who's the schlepper, what happens to him? He becomes less and less valuable the farther down the hierarchy you go. The farther down the hierarchy you go, the less he's paid, the less attention is paid to him, the less important he is in the project. The less of the project he feels responsible for. The less of the project he feels responsible for. Remember what was the first space shuttle that blew up? The Challenger? Remember the Challenger? There was a major investigation after the destruction of the Challenger. They wanted to figure out who was at fault. Who did they decide in the end? The answer was nobody. Nobody. Nobody was at fault. The managers at Thiokol said, we built the thing, but we told you not to fly it when it was cold. The managers at NASA said it wasn't our decision to launch it. It came from up higher above. The managers at NASA said it wasn't our decision. In the end, they could find nobody culpable for this thing. Because if you build a human pyramid of hierarchy of labor, a bureaucracy of labor, then in the end, nobody's responsible for the whole thing. Everyone's responsible for such a tiny little part of it. What was Adolf Eichmann's defense in 1961? Adolf Eichmann's defense was, I am not the mastermind of the destruction of the Jews. Adolf Eichmann said, I like Jews. I have Jewish friends. I have Jewish neighbors. My job was to make train schedules. He was in charge of Department B4B, which was train scheduling. He says, you got the wrong guy. I'm not the mastermind. I'm just a train scheduler. That's all. And I'm good at scheduling trains. He was so good at scheduling trains that the son of a bitch killed 400,000 Hungarian Jews. His thing, because the bureaucracy breaks the task into so many tiny little pieces that nobody can be held responsible. Yes, please.
I was an employee at Thiokol at the time.
Were you really? It's your fault.
Well, actually, it was one of the engineers who finally got blamed for it, and about 10 years later, he was finally paid his salary because they couldn't prove it.
Right. Thiokol called NASA the night before and said, don't launch, it's too cold. And NASA overruled Thiokol because they said, what do you guys know? You just built it.
Came down from much higher than that.
Yeah, I know, but it came down from the White House. Right? They said. But you see, what human hierarchy does, in the same way that a city hides us morally, bureaucracy hides us morally. And what you have here is a Tower of Babel where you have people who speak different languages. Nobody takes moral responsibility for the act. Yeah.
But at this point, I think more people live in cities than not, and that figure is growing. And we get culture from cities, the move with agriculture and into cities, and we get culture. So, are you saying, or is the Bible saying we should all go back to farming?
Yeah, the Bible would.
But that's,
I'm not saying that.
but cities,
I was a lousy farmer. I did farming for a summer, right? My father's a labor Zionist, so I was raised to believe in the glorious holiness of hands-on hard labor on the land. I did it for one summer on the kibbutz. No. Boring. Horrible. Anu banu artsa livnotu lihibanot ba is a lie, right? All right, let's one more line because we have to finish. Ready? So what I'm suggesting is here is we have not only a Tower of Babel, we have a Tower of Interpretations. This is a story with multiple interpretations. It's a story about the moral dangers of cities. It's a story about the moral dangers of human hierarchies, of bureaucracies. It's a story about the dangers of technology. It's a story about how the city of Babel really got founded as a sin. It's a story about, let's do one more. It's a story about how cultures got confounded. One more, and then we'll conclude. Why did they build it? What was their motivation in building this? What was their motivation? We'll look at the next line. Come, let us build a city and a tower with its top in the sky. Why? To make a name for ourselves, else we be scattered over the world. Right? V'naseh lanu shem, pen nafutz al pnei haaretz, kol haaretz. Now, not to get political, but why does a person put up a big building with his name on the top? Tishman? No, Monty's, whatever. Why? What is the motivation here? Think for a second. What's the motivation? What do they just see? The world was washed clean of life, right? So death is now a real entity. It's a real character in the story, right? Death is a real character in the story. And the ultimate motivation of this is, I want to defeat death. How do I want to defeat death? If I build something big enough and put my name on it in big enough letters, I will defeat death. I will live forever. The human urge for immortality. The human urge, the greatest fear is not the fear of death. The greatest fear is oblivion, which is to have lived and died and no one knew you lived. It's to be wiped clean from the face of the earth. So they build a tower because if I build this tower, then I will be immortal. I'll be famous. Remember fame? I'm going to live forever. That's the song, right? I want to be immortal. And what does the Torah say about that? Well, for a minute, I want you to remember a couple things. First of all, who's telling this story? A people whose temple was just destroyed. The temple was destroyed and we were taken to Babylon, and that's who's telling this story, right? So the people whose temple and whose city was destroyed and whose land was dispossessed, taken to exile to Babylon, standing in the great city of Babylon where there's this huge tower. And what do they say about that tower? We who have no temple and no city and no power in the world and no land, and we see this great mighty empire and we're envious. They'll live forever and we won't. And yet, they're gone and we're reading the story. So that in the end, the question is, how do you achieve immortality? And if your goal is to achieve immortality and you think that by building a tower out of brick and mortar you're going to achieve immortality?
By writing a book.
By writing a book and telling the story and finding a language with which to communicate to humanity. Right, Pop, you get the last comment, then we're going to have to go. I know, but I have to go teach. I know, but I get Shabbos until 6 o'clock and then I have to go home. Yeah.